The microphone felt surprisingly heavy in my hand, as I stood before 200 of the most elegant, judgmental faces I'd ever seen. My son David's wedding reception had transformed from a fairy tale celebration into my personal courtroom, and I was about to deliver a verdict that would shatter everything Vanessa and her mother thought they knew about me. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I apologize for the interruption, but there's something I need to clarify before I leave, as the bride has requested." Vanessa's face had gone from flushed anger to pale confusion in seconds. Her mother Diane stood frozen beside her, champagne glass suspended halfway to her lips. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how a 58-year-old elementary school custodian ended up holding a microphone at the most exclusive country club in Westchester County, about to detonate a truth bomb that would reshape my family forever, you need to know where this all started. It began 6 months ago, on a Tuesday evening in March, when David showed up at my small ranch house in Greenville with Chinese takeout and an announcement that made his eyes shine brighter than I'd seen in years. "Mom, I'm getting married," he said, setting the containers on my worn Formica kitchen table. The same table where he'd done his homework for 12 years, where we'd eaten countless dinners for two after his father Paul died when David was just 7 years old. I pulled him into a hug, genuinely thrilled. At 32, David had focused so intensely on his career as a civil engineer that I'd worried he might never find someone. "Tell me everything," I said, serving us both the sesame chicken we'd been ordering from Wang's garden since he was a teenager. He pulled out his phone, showing me photos of a striking woman with perfectly styled auburn hair and a smile that looked professionally whitened. Vanessa Chen Morrison, he explained, was a vice president at a Manhattan investment firm. They'd met at a charity gala his company had sponsored. "She's incredible, Mom. Smart, ambitious, successful. Her family lives in Greenwich. Her dad owns a pharmaceutical company, and her mom is on the boards of like 5 different cultural organizations." I heard something in his voice I didn't quite like. Not love exactly, but something closer to awe, maybe even a hint of insecurity. My son, who had a master's degree from Cornell and designed bridges that would stand for generations, sounded almost grateful that this woman had chosen him. "When do I get to meet her?" I asked, pushing aside my concerns. I was probably just being an overprotective mother. "That's the thing," David said, suddenly very interested in his low mane. "Her family is throwing an engagement party next weekend. It's going to be pretty formal, at their country club in Greenwich." "Sounds lovely. Should I wear the navy dress I wore to your college graduation?" David hesitated. "Actually, Mom, Vanessa's mother Diane has some very specific ideas about dress codes. She's kind of traditional about these things. Maybe we could go shopping." My treat. That should have been my first clue. David had never cared about clothes beyond whether they were clean and comfortable. This concern wasn't coming from him. The engagement party was held at the Fairhaven Country Club, a sprawling estate with manicured lawns that probably cost more to maintain than I made in a year. David had indeed taken me shopping, and I wore a new cocktail dress in deep burgundy that the saleswoman assured me was appropriate for the occasion. I'd even gotten my hair done at a proper salon instead of my usual supercuts. I arrived early, wanting to make a good impression. The ballroom was decorated with elaborate floral arrangements, peonies, orchids, and roses in shades of blush and cream that must have cost thousands of dollars. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and tuxedoed waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that looked too artistic to eat. Vanessa's mother appeared beside me, as if materializing from the expensive wallpaper. Diane Chen Morrison was 63, with the kind of ageless face that spoke of excellent genes, better skincare, and possibly a talented plastic surgeon. She wore a designer suit I recognized from a Vogue magazine David's receptionist had left in my car, and diamonds that caught the light with every gesture. You must be Margaret, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. David's mother, how nice of you to come. The pause before nice told me everything I needed to know about what she really thought. I wouldn't miss celebrating my son's engagement, I replied warmly, extending my hand. She shook it briefly, her grip limp and dismissive. Yes, well, David is certainly fortunate. Vanessa could have had her pick of anyone you know. Her ex-boyfriend was a hedge fund manager. And yet she chose my son, I said, maintaining my smile, which shows excellent judgment. Diane's eyes swept over me, cataloging and dismissing in one efficient motion. You work at a school, David mentioned. I'm a custodian at Greenville Elementary, have been for 30 years. How humble. The word dripped with condescension. Vanessa's career is quite demanding, of course. She's being considered for senior vice president. We're hoping she won't have to slow down too much for domestic concerns. Before I could respond, David appeared with Vanessa on his arm. My son looked handsome in his new suit, but there was tension around his eyes. Vanessa was even more striking in person, wearing a white cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Vanessa, this is my mom, David said, his voice carrying a nervous edge I didn't like. Mrs. Sullivan, Vanessa said, offering me the same limp handshake her mother had. What an interesting dress. Interesting, not lovely, not beautiful. Interesting. The word women use when they mean inappropriate or unfortunate but are too polite to say so directly. Thank you, I replied. And congratulations to you both. I'm so happy for David. Yes, well, we have many guests to greet, Diane interjected. Vanessa's godfather is a state senator, you know, and her uncle is here from Hong Kong. He owns a shipping company. Very important connections. They swept away, leaving me standing alone near the champagne fountain. I spent the rest of the evening being politely ignored by most of the guests and occasionally patronized by Diane's friends, who seemed fascinated by the novelty of meeting someone who actually cleaned floors for a living. David found me later looking miserable. Mom, I'm sorry. Diane can be kind of intense about social stuff. It's fine, sweetheart, I lied, hugging him. I'm just happy you're happy. But I wasn't fine, and over the next 4 months of wedding planning, I would discover just how not fine things could get. The wedding preparations began immediately, with Vanessa and Diane taking complete control. I received exactly one invitation to participate, a bridal shower at Diane's home in Greenwich, where I was the only guest not wearing designer clothes or discussing their second homes in the Hamptons. Vanessa opened gift after gift of expensive kitchen gadgets and luxury linens, barely glancing at the hand-embroidered tablecloth I'd spent weeks creating. It had been my own mother's pattern, delicate flowers and vines that took hours to stitch properly. I'd included a card explaining its significance as a family heirloom. How quaint, Vanessa said, holding it up briefly before setting it aside. Though I'm not sure where we'd use it. Our decorator is going for a very modern aesthetic. Diane nodded approvingly. Yes, the apartment they're buying in Tribeca is quite contemporary. 23rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows. $2 million, but worth every penny for the right address. I felt my jaw tighten but said nothing. What could I say? That I still lived in the same 1,200-square-foot ranch I'd bought with Paul 31 years ago. That my entire house could fit in their living room. After the shower, Diane cornered me in the hallway. Margaret, I want to be frank with you. Vanessa and I are planning a wedding that reflects their future together, sophisticated, elegant, appropriate for their social circle. We understand that financially, this might be beyond your means. I haven't been asked to contribute, I pointed out. No, and we wouldn't expect you to. The Chen Morrisons are covering the expenses. We just want to be clear that this is being handled at a certain level. We wouldn't want you to feel pressured to participate in ways that might be uncomfortable for you. The message was clear. Stay out of the way, don't embarrass us with your poverty, and definitely don't try to contribute your working-class money to their society wedding. What Diane didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that I could have bought their country club twice over without touching my principal. My parents, Thomas and Alina Whitmore, had been extraordinarily wealthy. My father had invented a specialized component for industrial air conditioning systems in the 1960s and sold his patent to a major manufacturer for what would now be worth nearly $50 million. They'd lived comfortably but not ostentatiously, investing wisely and establishing a trust that passed to me when they died. I'd been 28, newly married to Paul when I inherited. We made a decision together that would shape our entire lives. We would live simply, work honestly, and save the money for David's future and for causes we believed in. When Paul died in a construction accident, leaving me with a 7-year-old son and a broken heart, that decision became even more important. I wanted David to grow up understanding the value of hard work, the dignity of labor, the importance of character over cash. So I took the custodial job at his elementary school, partly to be near him, partly to set an example. We lived on my salary and Paul's small life insurance policy. The trust fund grew quietly in the background, managed by my lawyer Bernard Hastings, donated generously to scholarships and charities and waiting. I'd used some of it for David's college, though I let him think he'd earned full scholarships. I'd helped him with his first apartment in the city, though he believed his signing bonus had stretched further than it actually had. I'd always been there, invisibly supporting, letting him build his confidence on what he thought was his own merit. Now, listening to Diane dismiss me as too poor to participate in my only son's wedding, I made a decision. I would give David and Vanessa the wedding of their dreams. Every luxurious detail they desired, I would provide. But they wouldn't know it was me. I called Bernard the next day. "Margaret," he said warmly. He'd been my parents' lawyer and had become a trusted friend over the decades. "What can I do for you?" "I need you to pay for a wedding," I said. "A very expensive wedding, anonymously." "How expensive are we talking?" "Probably around $150,000. Bernard whistled softly. "That's quite a wedding. And you want the payments to remain anonymous?" "Completely. Set up whatever legal structure you need. David can know there's a family benefactor helping, but no one, especially not the bride's family, can know it's me." "May I ask why?" I explained the situation. Bernard, who'd watched me raise David alone, understood immediately. "They're treating you like the help," he said, anger edging into his usually calm voice. "Yes, but I am the help. That's my job, and I'm not ashamed of it. What bothers me is that they've decided that's all I am, all I can be. They've looked at my uniform and my small house and decided I have nothing of value to offer." "So you're going to prove them wrong?" "No," I corrected. "I'm going to give my son a beautiful wedding because I love him. What Vanessa and Diane learn from that is up to them." Bernard set up an anonymous family trust that would handle all wedding payments. David was informed that a distant relative had established a wedding fund for him. Not a lie, technically, since I was family. Vanessa and Diane were thrilled that David's family connections had come through, though they made it clear they assumed it was some wealthy uncle on his late father's side. Over the next 3 months, I watched my son's wedding take shape into something extraordinary. Diane and Vanessa chose the Meadowbrook Estate, an exclusive venue overlooking Long Island Sound. They booked the Chamberlain String Ensemble, a renowned quartet that usually played at Carnegie Hall. They hired Andre Laurent, a celebrity florist whose work had appeared in Martha Stewart weddings. The catering would be provided by Marchand, a Michelin-starred chef who created custom menus for the elite. The cake was coming from Dominique Ansel himself. Vanessa's dress was Vera Wang Couture. The invitations were hand-calligraphed on Italian paper with gold leaf details. Every single bill came to Bernard, who paid it from the trust and sent me the receipts. I kept them all in a folder in my nightstand, though I didn't know why. Insurance, maybe, or evidence. I continued to be excluded from nearly every planning session. I was informed of decisions after they were made, invited to precisely one dress fitting where Vanessa modeled her gown while Diane praised every detail, and asked my opinion exactly never. The few times I was included, the condescension was palpable. "We're having lobster and filet mignon for the main course," Diane announced at a family dinner 3 months before the wedding. "Vanessa's cousin is vegan, so there will be a special option, of course. I hope that's not too exotic for your tastes, Margaret." "I'm sure it will be delicious," I replied evenly. "You've probably never had lobster," Vanessa added with a laugh that wasn't entirely kind. "It's amazing. You'll love it." I bit my tongue. I'd had lobster at some of the finest restaurants in New York, treating myself occasionally to remind myself that the money was real, that I was choosing simplicity rather than having it forced upon me. But they didn't need to know that. David looked uncomfortable. "Mom has good taste, Vanessa." "Of course she does," Diane said smoothly. "In her own way. We all have different levels of exposure to fine things." The worst moment came 6 weeks before the wedding, during a final planning meeting I'd been asked to attend. We sat in Diane's formal living room, all silk upholstery and original artwork, discussing final details. "Now about the seating chart," Diane said, pulling out an elaborate diagram. "We've put you at table 12, Margaret. It's near the kitchen but still has a lovely view of the gardens." Table 12. I glanced at the chart. The immediate family tables were 1 through 4, surrounding the bride and groom's table. The important business connections and society friends filled tables 5 through 9. Distant relatives and David's work colleagues occupied 10 and 11. Table 12 was where they'd placed David's childhood friends who hadn't made it big, his former college roommate who taught high school, and his favorite uncle who worked as a mechanic. "You're putting David's mother at table 12?" I asked quietly. "Well, we assumed you'd be more comfortable with people from similar backgrounds," Vanessa said brightly. "David's friend Marcus is a teacher, and his uncle Frank is so down-to-earth. You'll have so much in common." "Vanessa, maybe we should," David started. "It's fine," I interrupted, meeting Diane's eyes. She knew exactly what she was doing. This was a power play, a final humiliation. Put the poor custodian mother in the back with the working-class guests, away from the people who mattered. "Wonderful," Diane said with a satisfied smile. "I'm so glad you understand, Margaret. We knew you'd be reasonable about these social necessities." I drove home that night in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. In my small living room, surrounded by furniture I'd owned for decades and family photos in drugstore frames, I pulled out my folder of receipts. $147,000 so far, with final payments still to come. I could stop this, I thought. I could tell Bernard to cancel everything, reveal the truth, let their carefully planned society wedding collapse. Let them scramble to put together something they could actually afford on their own. But that would hurt David, and despite everything, I loved my son. Even if he'd been weak enough to let his fiancée and future mother-in-law treat me this way. No, I would give them their perfect wedding. And if the opportunity arose to teach them a lesson about judging people by their circumstances, well, I'd deal with that when it came. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a phone call from Vanessa. "Margaret, we need to talk about what you're wearing," she said without preamble. "I have a dress," I replied. "A simple navy sheath, very appropriate." "I'm sure it's lovely for what you're used to, but this is a high society wedding." Diane and I think you should let us help you choose something more suitable. That's very thoughtful, but I'm comfortable with my choice. There was a pause. Margaret, I'm trying to be kind here, but the fact is, photographers will be everywhere. This wedding is going to be in the society pages. We can't have David's mother looking like she shops at discount stores. My jaw clenched. I see. I knew you'd understand. Diane has connections at Saks. We can get you something appropriate. Maybe a nice mother of the groom dress in a neutral color. Something that won't draw too much attention. I'll think about it, I said and ended the call. I didn't think about it. I'd been wearing the navy dress I bought for David's college graduation. The same one I'd offered to wear to the engagement party before David insisted on taking me shopping. It was well made, classic, appropriate. The fact that it was 5 years old and had cost $200 instead of $2,000 didn't make it unsuitable, but their concern told me everything. This wasn't about appropriate attire. This was about erasing any visual evidence that David came from working-class roots, about making sure his mother didn't remind their society friends that he was the son of a custodian, not old money. The wedding day arrived with perfect June weather, clear skies, gentle breeze, temperature in the mid-70s. I drove to the Meadowbrook estate alone, my navy dress hanging in the back seat, my heart heavy with a mixture of joy for David and sorrow for what this day had revealed about his choices. The estate was transformed into something from a fairy tale. Thousands of white roses and peonies created arbors and centerpieces. The ceremony space overlooked the Sound, with chairs arranged in a semicircle around an altar draped in silk and flowers. A string quartet played softly as guests arrived. I found my seat, in the third row, not the first. Diane had explained that the first row was for immediate family who were closely involved in the wedding planning. The message was clear. I might be David's mother, but I hadn't earned the place of honor. The ceremony was beautiful. David looked handsome in his custom tuxedo, his eyes bright with happiness as Vanessa walked down the aisle in her Vera Wang gown. I cried, as mothers do, though my tears were more complicated than the happy ones around me. The reception was even more elaborate. The ballroom glittered with crystal and candlelight. Each table had a centerpiece that could have paid my monthly utilities. The 5-tier cake was a work of art. The band was already playing soft jazz as guests found their seats. I made my way to table 12, as assigned. Marcus greeted me warmly. He'd been David's best friend since 3rd grade and was now teaching math at an inner-city school. Uncle Frank was there with his wife Marie, both dressed in their Sunday best and clearly overwhelmed by the opulence. "This is something else," Frank said, shaking his head at the gold-rimmed china and crystal stemware. "Must have cost a fortune." "It's beautiful," I agreed. From table 12, I had a clear view of the head table where David and Vanessa sat surrounded by the wedding party. I could see Diane holding court at table 2, entertaining what looked like a state senator and his wife. I could see Vanessa's godfather, a renowned surgeon, laughing at table 3, and I could see Vanessa noticing me. Her eyes swept across the room and landed on my navy dress. The same navy dress I'd worn to David's graduation. The same navy dress she'd told me wasn't appropriate. Her expression flickered with displeasure before she leaned over to whisper something to her mother. Diane's head swiveled in my direction. Even from 50 feet away, I could see the tight-lipped disapproval. They exchanged another whispered conversation, both glancing repeatedly at me. This isn't good, I thought. But the evening was young, and I was determined to enjoy celebrating my son, regardless of their opinions. Dinner was served. The lobster and filet mignon Diane had worried might be too exotic for me, and it was indeed delicious. The speeches began. Vanessa's father, Robert, gave a polished welcome that mentioned his daughter's accomplishments and bright future. Diane offered a toast about love and partnership that somehow managed to reference their country club membership 3 times. The best man, Vanessa's brother Christopher, delivered a funny speech about David marrying up, that got uncomfortable laughs. Then it was time for the traditional mother-son dance. I stood preparing to join David on the dance floor when Diane appeared at my elbow. "Margaret, a word," she said quietly. We stepped aside near the hallway to the restrooms. "I thought we discussed your attire," Diane said, her voice low but sharp. "You discussed it. I chose to wear what I felt was appropriate. That dress is ancient and cheap. Guests have been asking me if you're one of the venue staff." The lie was so transparent it was almost funny. No one had mistaken me for staff, but the insult was deliberate. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to dance with my son." "Actually," Diane said, stepping closer, "Vanessa and I have discussed this, and we think it might be better if you sat this one out. Vanessa will dance with David for the mother-son dance. It's more appropriate given the optics." "Optics?" I repeated, my voice dangerous. "The photographer is from town and country, Margaret. These photos will be in print. Vanessa is simply concerned about how things look." Before I could respond, Vanessa herself appeared, resplendent in her second dress of the evening. She'd changed after dinner into a sleeker reception gown. "Is there a problem?" she asked, looking between us. "I was just explaining to your mother-in-law about the photos," Diane said. Vanessa turned to me, and in that moment, I saw something in her face that made my blood run cold. Not just condescension or social anxiety. Actual contempt. "Margaret, I need you to understand something," she said, her voice saccharine sweet. "This is my wedding, my special day, and frankly, you're embarrassing us." The words hung in the air between us. Around us, the reception, "That dress, the way you're acting like you belong at the family tables when clearly you don't understand these social situations. Some of Robert's biggest clients are here. The mayor is here. We have photographers from 3 different publications, and you look like—" She paused, searching for words, "like you're attending a church potluck." "Vanessa," I said carefully, "I'm David's mother." "And I'm his wife," she snapped back. "His future. And that future involves moving in circles where appearances matter, where people are judged by their presentation and their connections. You may not understand that world, but David does now. He's different than when you raised him. He's better." "Better," the word hit like a slap. Diane nodded approvingly. "We're not trying to be cruel, Margaret. We're simply being realistic. Perhaps it would be best if you left quietly. Made an excuse about not feeling well. That way there won't be any awkward photos or situations." "You want me to leave my son's wedding," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We think it would be for the best," Vanessa confirmed. "You've been here for the ceremony. You've had the dinner. But the reception is when all the important photographs happen, and frankly, we can't risk you being in them looking like that." Something inside me broke. Not with sadness or hurt, though those feelings were there. No, what broke was the last restraint I'd been holding onto, the last bit of patience and understanding I'd extended to these people who'd spent months treating me like I was worthless. "I see," I said. Then I walked past them, not toward the exit but toward the band. "Where are you going?" Vanessa called after me, alarm creeping into her voice. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the bandleader, an older gentleman in a sharp tuxedo who'd been conducting with professional grace all evening. "Excuse me," I said. "I need to make an announcement." He looked uncertain. "We're scheduled to begin dancing in 5 minutes. This will only take a moment," I assured him. "I'm the groom's mother." That got his attention. He handed me his microphone, and suddenly I was standing in front of 200 people, with Vanessa and Diane rushing toward me from across the ballroom, their faces masks of horror. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I apologize for the interruption, but there's something I need to clarify before I leave, as the bride has requested." The room fell silent. David stood up at the head table, confusion and concern on his face. "My name is Margaret Sullivan, and I am David's mother. For the past 6 months, I've been planning to make this speech during the traditional toasts, but given recent developments, I think now is more appropriate. Vanessa reached me, grabbing for the microphone. What are you doing? I stepped away from her, my voice projecting across the room. Vanessa and Diane have made it very clear that I'm an embarrassment, that my dress is inappropriate, that I don't belong in photographs with important people, that I should leave quietly so as not to remind anyone that David comes from working-class roots. Gasps rippled through the crowd. David pushed through the guests toward me, his face stricken. What they don't know, I continued, pulling out my phone, is who paid for this wedding. I opened my email and pulled up the folder Bernard had sent me that morning. Every single receipt, every payment confirmation, all organized and documented. Bernard, I called out, spotting my lawyer at table 8. Can you help me with the screen? Bernard, bless him, understood immediately. He moved to the AV controls, and within seconds, my phone was mirrored on the large screens throughout the ballroom. The same screens that had been showing the beautiful slideshow of David and Vanessa's engagement photos. Now they showed a spreadsheet, line by line, expense by expense. The Meadowbrook Estate venue rental, $45,000, paid by the Sullivan Family Trust, administered by Bernard Hastings. I scrolled down. The Chamberlain String Ensemble, $8,000, paid by the Sullivan Family Trust. Stop this, Diane hissed, but she was frozen, unable to look away from the screens. Andre Laurent Floral Design, $32,000, paid by the Sullivan Family Trust. March End Catering, $41,000, including the Michelin-starred chef and all staff, paid by the Sullivan Family Trust. I kept scrolling. The wedding cake, the photographer, the videographer, the hand-calligraphed invitations, the vintage champagne, the designer linens, the lighting design, the valet service, the custom cocktails, the late-night dessert bar, every single item, every single expense. $153,472, all paid by me. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. 200 guests stared at the screens, at me, at Vanessa and Diane, whose faces had gone from red to white to gray. You see, I said, my voice quieter now but no less clear, I am embarrassing. I'm a custodian at an elementary school. I wear the same dress to multiple events because I prefer to spend my money on things that matter, like my son's happiness. I don't own designer clothes or jewelry or a house in Greenwich. I looked directly at Vanessa. But I do have something you assumed I didn't. I have the resources to give my son the wedding of his dreams. And more importantly, I have the character to do it without needing credit or recognition. I did it because I love David, not because I wanted to impress your society friends. Tears were running down my face now, but I didn't stop. I asked that the payments remain anonymous because I wanted you both to plan the wedding you truly wanted, without feeling obligated to me. I wanted David to feel proud of what his new family could provide. David had reached me now, his face devastated. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know they said those things to you. I know, sweetheart, I said gently, handing the microphone back to the bandleader. I know. Vanessa stood frozen, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. I didn't, we thought. You thought what? I asked, turning to face her directly. That because I clean floors for a living I must be poor. That because I drive a 10-year-old car and live in a small house, I have nothing to offer. That wealth is measured in designer labels and country club memberships. Diane finally found her voice. We had no idea. David said a family trust was paying. I am family, I said simply. I'm his mother, the only parent he has left, and I have spent 30 years teaching him that character matters more than cash, that kindness matters more than status, that how you treat people, especially those you think are beneath you, reveals who you really are. I looked at my son, my beautiful boy who was crying now. I thought I'd taught you better than this, David. I thought you'd never let someone treat me this way, no matter how much money their family had or how important their connections were. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Mom, I'm so sorry." The guests were starting to murmur, conversations breaking out at tables around the room. I heard someone say, "Did the groom's mother really pay for everything?" Another voice, "They tried to throw her out of her own son's wedding." Robert, Vanessa's father, approached us. His face was bright red. "Diane, what the hell is going on? You told me the Chen Morrison family was funding this wedding." "We were going to," Diane stammered. "We thought. David said there was a trust." "There was," I confirmed. "My parents established it 40 years ago. I've been living on my salary and letting the principal grow, donating to scholarships and charities. Using it only when it really mattered." I looked around the beautiful ballroom, at the flowers and candles and elegant guests. This mattered. My son's happiness mattered enough to spend this money. What I didn't anticipate was that his bride and her family would treat me like hired help while I was paying for their party. Vanessa finally seemed to find her voice. "Mrs. Sullivan, I am so deeply sorry. I had no idea. We just assumed." "That's the problem," I interrupted gently. "You assumed. You looked at my job and my lifestyle and you assumed that's all I was, all I could be. You never asked about my story, my choices, my values. You just dismissed me as too poor and too common to matter." The wedding coordinator appeared at my elbow. "Mrs. Sullivan, do you want me to?" "No," I said. "I want nothing. I looked at my son, seeing both the boy he'd been and the man he'd become. A man who'd let his fiancée and future mother-in-law belittle his mother for months. A man who'd been so dazzled by wealth and status that he'd forgotten the values I'd raised him with. Do you, David, do you really want me here? Or do you want the mother who fits into Vanessa's world? The one with the designer clothes and the country club membership and the sophisticated manners?" "I want my mom," he said, and the raw pain in his voice broke my heart all over again. "I want the mom who came to every school play and baseball game, who helped me with my science projects and taught me to be kind to everyone. I want the mom I love, and I'm so sorry I let them make you feel like you weren't enough." Vanessa stepped forward. "Mrs. Sullivan, I cannot apologize enough for my behavior. It was cruel and classist and inexcusable. You are absolutely right. I judged you based on appearances and assumptions, and I was completely wrong." Tears streamed down her face, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely human, vulnerable and ashamed and young. "I thought I was so sophisticated," she continued, "so worldly and successful, but you're right, I have no character, none that matters. I was willing to throw my husband's mother out of our wedding because I cared more about what photographers might think than about basic human decency." Diane was crying too. "Margaret, I don't expect you to forgive us. What we did was unforgivable. But please believe that we are genuinely horrified by our own behavior. We got so caught up in status and appearances that we lost sight of what actually matters." I stood there, surrounded by the wedding I'd paid for, looking at these people who'd spent months making me feel worthless. Part of me wanted to walk out, to let them stew in their shame and embarrassment, to let their society friends gossip about how they'd tried to eject the very woman who'd funded their elaborate celebration. But I looked at David, my son, and saw the little boy who used to hold my hand on the way to school, the teenager who'd asked my advice about college and careers, the young man who'd called me every Sunday without fail until he'd met Vanessa. "I'll stay," I said quietly, "but not because you've apologized. I'll stay because I love my son and this is his wedding day. He deserves to have his mother here." David pulled me into a tight hug. "Thank you, Mom, thank you." The wedding coordinator cleared her throat delicately. "Shall we continue with the reception, perhaps the mother-son dance?" David pulled back, wiping his eyes. "Only if Mom is okay with it." "I'm okay with it," I said. The band started playing What a Wonderful World, the song David and I had danced to at his high school graduation. As we moved onto the dance floor, I felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on us. But for the "I really am sorry, Mom," David whispered as we danced. "I got so caught up in Vanessa's world and trying to impress her family that I forgot who I was, who raised me, what you taught me about real worth. I know, sweetheart, that I should have defended you. From the very first engagement party, I should have stood up for you." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have, but you can start now." When the song ended, there was applause, genuine, warm applause. As I returned to my seat, several guests stopped me to introduce themselves, to compliment the wedding, to ask about my work with scholarships and charities. The mayor himself came over. "Mrs. Sullivan, I had no idea we had such a generous philanthropist in Greenville. I'd love to talk with you about some community initiatives." "I'd be happy to," I said, surprised. The rest of the evening unfolded with a strange new dynamic. Diane and Vanessa were subdued, almost meek. Robert spent considerable time apologizing and asking about my parents' business. David stayed close to me, introducing me to his friends and colleagues with genuine pride rather than subtle shame. And gradually my anger began to ease. Not forgiveness exactly, that would take time, but a softening. A recognition that people make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, and that growth is possible if they're willing to do the work. Near the end of the reception, Vanessa approached me alone. "Mrs. Sullivan, may I speak with you privately?" We stepped out onto the terrace overlooking the Sound. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I want you to know that I'm returning all the wedding gifts," Vanessa said. "Every single one. And we're writing checks to repay you for the wedding expenses." "That's not necessary." "It is," she insisted. "Not because I think money can erase what we did, but because this wedding shouldn't be a debt between us. And because—" She paused, swallowing hard. "Because I need to prove to you, and to David, and to myself that I'm capable of being better than I was today. Vanessa, I grew up surrounded by wealth and privilege," she continued. "My parents taught me that appearances matter, that social status is important, that certain people are worth more than others based on their circumstances. It's taken me 29 years to realize how toxic and wrong." She looked at me with genuine remorse. "You could have revealed the truth at any point during these months. You could have humiliated us in front of our friends. Instead, you quietly gave us the wedding we wanted, asked for nothing, and only spoke up when we pushed you too far. That's character, that's grace, that's what I want to learn from you." I felt tears prickling my eyes again. "It's going to take time, Vanessa, for all of us. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight." "I know, but I'm willing to do the work. David loves you so much, and I want to understand why. I want to be someone worthy of being part of your family." "Then start by being yourself," I said. "Not the person your mother trained you to be. Not the corporate executive persona you wear to work. Just Vanessa, the real person underneath all those expectations." She nodded, wiping away tears. "Can we start over someday?" "We can try," I agreed. The reception ended with David and Vanessa's departure in a shower of rose petals and well wishes. As the guests dispersed and the staff began cleaning up, I stood on the terrace watching the last light fade from the sky. Bernard joined me, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "That was quite a speech," he said, handing me a glass. "It needed to be said. Your parents would be proud of you, Margaret. You used their legacy to teach a powerful lesson about character and dignity." "I hope so," I said. "I really do." As I drove home that night, my navy dress slightly wrinkled but my head held high, I thought about the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Rich is about money, about bank accounts and trust funds. Wealthy is about character, about the richness of your relationships and the value of your principles. I'd spent 30 years being rich while living like I wasn't, teaching my son that wealth comes from who you are. The aftermath of the wedding unfolded in ways I hadn't anticipated. David and Vanessa postponed their honeymoon to Bora Bora, instead spending a week at our small house in Greenville. Vanessa insisted on sleeping in David's childhood bedroom, eating my cooking, and learning about the life her husband had lived before meeting her. She went with me to work one day, spending 8 hours helping me clean classrooms and talking to teachers about the students I'd watched grow up over 3 decades. She asked questions about my parents, about Paul, about my choices and values. Real questions, not polite small talk. You could have lived anywhere, she said, wiping down a chalkboard. Bought a mansion, traveled the world, joined all the right clubs. Why didn't you? Because none of that mattered to me, I said honestly. What mattered was raising a good man, being present in his life, living according to my values rather than society's expectations. Did you ever regret it, when people treated you like you weren't important? I thought about that, sometimes, but then I'd remember that their opinions didn't define my worth. I knew who I was, what I had, what I'd chosen. Their ignorance was their problem, not mine. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. I think that's what I need to learn, to know who I am regardless of what others think. Diane also reached out, inviting me to lunch at her country club, but suggesting we meet at a diner I liked instead. Over coffee and pie, she apologized again, more fully and honestly than she had at the wedding. I raised Vanessa to believe the wrong things, she admitted. I thought I was teaching her to be strong and successful, but I was really teaching her to be shallow and cruel, seeing how we treated you, seeing your grace in response. It forced me to confront some hard truths about myself. We all make mistakes, I said, some bigger than others. Margaret, I want to ask you something. Would you be willing to tell me about your charitable work? Vanessa mentioned you funded scholarships. Over the next hour, I told her about the programs I supported. Scholarships for working-class students, grants for teachers in underfunded schools, support for families dealing with sudden loss like I had when Paul died. I'd like to help, Diane said. Not to make up for what I did, but because it's the right thing to do. Will you let me? We began meeting monthly, planning initiatives and supporting causes. Diane brought her connections and fundraising expertise. I brought my understanding of real community needs. Slowly, awkwardly, we built something resembling friendship. David and Vanessa's marriage. I was chasing the wrong kind of success, she told me 6 months after the wedding. I thought wealth meant money and status. You taught me it means purpose and impact. I'm proud of you, I said and meant it. A year after the wedding, David and Vanessa announced they were expecting a baby. This time, the family gathering was at my small house, not Diane's mansion. We sat around my old Formica table, eating pot roast and celebrating the news. We want to name her Alina, Vanessa said, after your mother, if that's okay with you. I couldn't speak for a moment, overcome with emotion. She would have loved that, I finally managed. She would have loved you. The baby arrived on a Tuesday in March, exactly 2 years after David had shown up with Chinese takeout to announce his engagement. Alina Margaret Sullivan came into the world with her father's eyes and her mother's determination. Holding her in the hospital, I thought about legacy, about what we passed down through generations. My parents had passed down financial wealth, yes, but more importantly, they'd passed down values of humility and service. I tried to pass those same values to David, and now, hopefully, he and Vanessa would pass them to Alina. Thank you, Mom, David said, watching me cradle his daughter, for everything. For raising me right, for teaching me real values, for not giving up on me when I lost my way. That's what mothers do, I said simply. We love you through your mistakes and celebrate when you grow. 2 years later, at Alina's second birthday party, I looked around my backyard. The same small yard where David had learned to ride a bike, where we'd had countless barbecues, where Paul and I had once dreamed of growing old together. It was filled with people from different worlds that had somehow merged. Diane and her society friends chatting with my fellow custodians. David's engineering colleagues playing with kids from the neighborhood. Vanessa's reformed country club set genuinely connecting with the teachers I'd worked with for decades. In the center of it all was Alina, delighted by the attention, surrounded by love that transcended social class and bank balances. Vanessa appeared beside me carrying lemonade, Happy? She asked. Very, I said honestly. Me too. She paused. Margaret, I want you to know that I tell Elena your story, about the wedding, about what we did and what you taught us.